Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tex Messages The Resurrection. I'm Rick Tex, the Parasite. I gotta say, every time I hear that original theme song from the first Tex Messages, it always pumps me up, gets my blood boiling, gets it flowing. Not in an angry way, just in a pumped up way. Like if you take nitric oxide shots, it thickens up your blood or loosens it, coagulates it or whatever. It gives it more vascularity or lubrication, or whatever the case may be, ladies and gentlemen. So the fact of the matter is, the reason why we always reiterate Text Messages, the Resurrection, is because the original Text Messages died for the sins of all talk shows, because no talk show is perfect. But the original Text Messages lives within all talk shows in mind, body, spirit, and soul, so that they may live on and preach the good word. Now, occasionally I will slip up and refer to this show as only Text Messages, but please note that it is Text Messages The Resurrection. The original Text Messages is pretty much gone and done for. So it's not something that we can ever revive. I mean, it's resurrected in the form of every other talk show in the future because its spirit lives within it. Every talk show that's well-meaning and people mean to do good things. Yeah, talk shows that are just propaganda, extravaganza, controlled by corporate media and just phonies propped up with, big corporate backing. Text Messages does not live within those shows. But the grassroots shows, the local heroes, the national heroes, even international heroes, people that are just trying to make their communities great again, Text Messages absolutely lives within them, ladies and gentlemen. And in fact, we're actually carrying on the legacy of one of the original local talk shows in central Minnesota back in the late 90s. There's a talk show that was on there's Cold Spring, St. Cloud, Painesville, Wilmer public access channels. I mean, it would usually come on at 3 in the morning, but I mean, it could have easily been a 5 to 6 p.m. time slot on primetime television, and it would have likely gotten hit ratings. It was very well produced. The cameraman was outstanding. I mean, the cameraman, we don't really have much of a cameraman here, but the cameraman on that show was next level. He was second to none, basically. And the host was awesome. He was no parasite. He was a full-on host. And he had a lot of good guests too and everything too. I mean, he could actually get people to join the show. I mean, if you actually think that Text Messages The Resurrection could get anybody to allocate any degree of time for the show, you're unfortunately heavily mistaken. But yeah, we're just trying to carry on the legacy, and we're not doing a very good job. I mean, I'll be the first to admit that. It's like, see, I'm even afraid to explain the name of that original show, just because for fear that attaching their name to this show, they may find it insulting because they ran such a high-quality show relative to this one. So, I mean, it would be moderately embarrassing to make any sort of correlation between Text Messages Resurrection and their show. But someday, we're working up towards it, ladies and gentlemen. Someday, hopefully, we'll get to that next level. So, I mean, we might have more future shows as well, different varieties, propaganda, extravaganza, Lutheran nonfiction. We might do some type of comedy, too, here and there. But usually, I'm not really a big fan of comedy. It's just not really my thing. So, what we want to get into today though, ladies and gentlemen, is we want to talk about the standards of sickness. Now, you may have heard of the AHA, the American Heart Association. Oddly enough, the leader of their president, John Warner, had a heart attack at the age of 52, which is a bit ironic. I mean, 52 it's getting up there in age, and if you got a sedentary job like being a president of a big company you're not going to be very heart healthy. But the fact is, it was a bit ironic that the AHA's president did have a heart attack at an early age. Now, everybody's genetically and hereditarily different, so it's not to say that, he followed the AHA's criteria and standard to a T, and that's why he had a heart attack. There may be a bit of correlation, but it's not the cause, ladies and gentlemen. The whole cause and correlation debate. But what we want to talk about today is the pharmaceuticals. They changed the definition of high blood pressure so that half of U.S. adults in treatment have to use the high-profit prescription drugs. So 1 week, everybody has low blood pressure or blood pressure under a safety threshold. Next week, all of a sudden, doctors determine that they're high blood pressure and now they need to take the prescription drugs. Now that's usually how this industry works. The pharmaceuticals team up with the AHA. It's corporatocracy, government and democracy intermingling. It's very dangerous too, because even in the most recent president we have, he happens to be assigning a lot of people to positions who were previously working for those companies. For example, the financial industry has JP, I don't know if this is exactly true, but say this is usually how it works. See, the president of JP Morgan will all of a sudden be the banking, housing, and financial head on government. And then they'll just keep swapping positions. And that's usually how it works. People will get paid by these industries to run for government, and then they'll get to be the politicians, congressmen, senators, House of Representatives, maybe even president, vice president. Then they basically have a job for life at these companies that paid them off. And that's basically how it works. That's why politicians can have whatever the Congress salary is, $100,000 a year, and then have 10 houses that are all valued at $5 million, because they have a lot of back doors towards their funding. Now, getting back to the prescription drugs here, though. See, a few years ago, high cholesterol was also altered so that they could sell the statin drugs, which is one of the highest profit margin drugs available. See, these companies, I think patents for prescription drugs, I believe, are about 7 years, and then the generics come out. So, and there's a lot of testing that goes into it by the FDA and things of that, FDC maybe, but or the FTC, excuse me, Federal Trade Commission. So there's a lot of those studies that go into it, and then they got to do a lot of testing before it hits market. And then when it hits market, then they can pay off, the government entity bodies that their buddy who used to work for the company now works at, so that they can just say, hey, we need to raise the standards of high blood pressure so that we can sell these drugs, or we need to raise the standards of cholesterol so that we can sell a statin drug. The fact of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, you don't really need any prescription drugs. Like, I would highly, Tex Messages The Resurrection certainly advises against just about all of them. The unfortunate part is, when you do, say for example, there are a few people who in the analog world, I happen to know them very personally, and they got involved with prescription drugs for some type of issues with neurological processes in their mind. Now, what happened is, they didn't really need the prescriptions, but they got onto them because a trusted authoritative figure told them they should. So they unequivocally and unconditionally trust society's authorities and went on those prescriptions. Now, what happens is, when they cease using those prescriptions for any amount of time, for any amount of reason, then things start to go haywire because they grow dependent on them. And then as a result of that, of the haywireness, then very, very bad, tragic things occurred. And now they no longer have an option of whether to take those drugs or not. And is it 100% attributable to using those drugs? It could be. If you look at school shooters, most of them are on the serotonin reuptake inhibitor drugs, or SSRIs, things of that nature. Almost every single one of them. It's not the gun's fault, or can't blame the tool or society. Yeah, you can kind of blame society, a sick society, or cultural norms, or corporate media pushing, murdering children, all that. That absolutely is a factor too. But the reality is, it's just poorly prescribed drugs, and then people just using the drugs in general. Now, yeah, do I have a degree from some institute of higher learning to say you should or shouldn't use drugs? Absolutely not. And I'll never spend the money or time to get one either. But I will absolutely research things, utilize common sense, use personal experience, use observations, and to a certain degree use emotions to foment enough motivation and dedication to look into these things and to take it seriously. So the fact of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, prescription drugs, Tex Messages The Resurrection's opinion, through all those things that I just mentioned, absolutely not necessary for anybody, unless you've already been using them for a long time and now you're hooked on them. Then you don't really have a choice. You basically would have to taper down to some degree, but as far as heart medication, for example, there's one time when I used to live at my parents' house. We were just sitting around watching TV, the flicker rates, and probably getting some propaganda and everything and getting brainwashed. But some lady barged in our house and said her husband had a heart attack, and he was right outside on the street. So, my parents had to go out there, yank him out of the car, call the EMS and all that. This was before cell phones. So we had to use our little rotary dial phone to dial 911 and get the authorities out there. But basically the lady said he didn't really like taking his heart medication, but now, since he was hooked on it, and he was already taking them for a while, when he stopped taking them, that's when disaster struck. Now, prior to that, maybe he didn't really have a problem with his heart. Maybe he was misdiagnosed, and then he had to take these prescriptions. So there's also that to consider, ladies and gentlemen. See, I always think of it as See, I got 3 hens outside, and I try to live life by the hen philosophy too. Health, exercise, nutrition. Nutrition, it ain't easy. There's a lot of poor choices out there. There's a lot of things that disguise themselves as being healthy when they're really pernicious. But I mean, just have to exercise common sense and find good, trustworthy sources, especially people that aren't trying to sell anything. See, at Tex Messages The Resurrection, we have an enormous budget. We don't need to sell anything. We have such an enormous budget that, in fact, we probably should start just donating it away to you, the ladies and gentlemen at home. But that's probably not going to happen because giving people doesn't create anything. Providing an incentive to work hard, that's what builds societies. Giving people stuff, unless they're completely handicapped and they need a little bit of catalyst, that's one thing. But to just give people stuff for no reason at all, completely unnecessary. Especially prescription drugs when they don't need them at all. So that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I'd have to say a lot of prescription drugs cause, especially the mental health ones, they cause nothing but trouble. If you got problems at home and everything like that too, then start with eating, start with exercise, and just working hard and focusing on goals. Yeah, it's not always easy. I mean, hell, if I don't walk around an hour and a half every other night, then yeah, sitting inside when it's 30 below outside, definitely not going to feel right and probably going to feel down. But I've sort of became tolerant on going outside and getting that oxygen intake and walking around and exercising. So I've basically become dependent on it now. I mean, to be dependent on exercise it may or may not necessarily be a bad thing either. Hopefully it provides more longevity. It's just trying to utilize common sense here, ladies and gentlemen. So that being said, you're listening to Tex Messages The Resurrection. Unfortunately, we didn't have a show yesterday. We had some problems in the studio. One of the pipes decided to burst, so we had to go ahead and replace that. First things first, we got to have a working studio with running water and everything as well. But now we got that fixed and eradicated, and we're just moving forward on 8 cylinders. The river is flowing. We're going downstream. So thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it, and have a good one.